Deb Howe, and as Andrew said, I am a landscape architect and I live here. And can you see this? Can everybody see this and understand that this is a plan of Lincoln Woods? It's not going to work. No, it won't work that way. Yeah, I want to leave it as vertical as I can. So this is a plan of Lincoln Woods, which was built in 1976. This plan is from 1974, so it was aspirational. This was the proposed layout of the site, and Wells Road, which runs through the site and out to the what's now the commuter rail lot, was at that point a wooded lot. And to orient you, we are right here. The breezeway is right here. This building is this building here that runs out to Lincoln Road. This building is that building over there. My house is up here, over there. And then, I don't know where the other unit is that you're going to see.
It's in the CD building.
It's in the, I don't know the lingo.
The building right here.
It's right here. It's right there. So, so I'm just going to give you a quick little rundown what I know of both living here and what I know of landscape history and the history of multifamily housing in the 20th century. And what I studied landscape architecture at Cornell, and we studied some multifamily housing. One complex that we looked at was, of course, in New York, you look at New York places. We looked at Sunnyside, New York and New Jersey. We looked at Sunnyside, which is a housing complex considered not revolutionary, but innovative in its day. And Sunnyside had grouped buildings around a central open space. And all the parking was ranged around the outside, the perimeter of the site, so that people could drive to their home and park, walk in the back door of their house, or maybe the front door, and then gather or find their community in the big green open space. That's exactly the opposite of what we have here. And you can look at an ideal, and then you can look at the reality of what the site presents you. And in this instance, Lincoln owned this sort of promontory of land between wetland off there, behind all of these buildings on this side, the far side of Lincoln Road. It's all wetland. On this side, the train tracks run down here. That's a control point. You can't go past the train tracks. You can't build on the train tracks. So there are two control lines. The wetlands here, and the railroad tracks over here. And then, of course, Lincoln Road, which runs along the bottom of this drawing. So in order to fit in a lot of units, I think there are 125 on this narrow winding point of road. Sir Jackson, who designed this place, put in this winding Wells Road and then ranged the buildings along it. And the roadway also includes parking. There is one long parking bay along Lincoln Road, and the rest of it is all within the complex. So in this instance then, the private spaces, the backyard open spaces, are really back at the perimeter, and then the roadway provides parking and sort of this community gathering space. So I think you just heard Gus Brown talk, and Gus told me when he and Lorraine first moved in together, they lived in one of the units over there, and he was telling me that they had moved into Lincoln Woods, and he said, we lived on the piazza. And I said, what's the piazza? And this parking lot is the piazza. So Dana had told me that Sir Jackson, that Joseph Louis Sert, who designed Peabody Terrace at Harvard, the graduate student high-rises on Memorial Drive, they're very crenellated. There are balconies that stick out and balconies that sort of recede, and it's very shelfy looking. There's a lot of edge there. And Dana told me that Sert was very interested in creating these little niches where community could take place, where little mini interactions between people could take place, but people could own their own private entries. So in ecology, the edge is always the most dynamic part of any landscape. It's where worlds not just collide, but they integrate. And so you can see here at Lincoln Woods, there's a similar kind of crenellation in the building faces. There's the entries that bump out, and then a little private space, just a teeny, maybe 3 or 4 feet, that can be a garden strip right up at the wall. Or in other places, there's a recessed entry, and then a garden space out front. But they're all opportunities for community and connection with the other residents here. So there is connection among the residents. There are plenty of people I don't know here. There are plenty of people I wave hi to. There are plenty of people I do know, particularly in my neighborhood, who I say hi to, and we might chat on the street, or we have a little conversation about gardening. And then there's some people I just avoid. But that's the way it is in every neighborhood. So I wanted to talk about that as the sort of aim of getting community happening here. Everybody has their own private entry, front and back to their unit. It's called defensible space. You get to control who comes into your private space. Another concept that this plan really illustrates is, the place was called Lincoln Woods. They took woods and carved this complex out of the woods. And this plan is kind of aspirational. On the plan, there are labeled some really big trees smack next to the road. These were trees that existed originally on the site. I look at it, I'm also a certified arborist, and I look at it and I'm like, I'm sure that tree came down, this tree came down in the building of this place, because you can't cut the roots of a 32-inch oak and cut 30% of the roots and not have it be injured and destabilized. But the big idea from reading this is to keep the roads shady, to keep the buildings in the woods. And you can see the flat roof, the horizons of the roofs. When I moved here 12 years ago, there were many more canopy trees, and you didn't see those flat horizons. You didn't see the exhaust fans on top of the buildings because the tree canopies obscured that. So there is something in modern architecture and modern landscape that it's something that I always try to do in my own work, and that is to use building mass and the orthogonal, the squared stuff, as a foil for the natural forms of trees, of shrubs, of leaf texture, and twig taper. You saw a lot of that when I moved in here. Since I moved in here, a lot of that has disappeared. When this place was planted, there were a lot of white pine trees here already, and a lot more white pines were planted. They're fast growing, they're beautiful, they provide year-round shade and interest, and they only last really in safe form around buildings for maybe 40, maybe 50 years before they start dropping really projectile limbs onto the roofs of buildings. So a lot of the white pines have been taken out. This one you can see over here, huge, that actually remains. It was on the original plan. That's a big old tree. But most of them are gone. There were a lot of oaks that were big, and some remain, but many of them have gone. Other fast-growing trees, honey locust. There was one down by my unit, and the resident complained about the honeydew dropping on his car, so they took it out. So that piece of shade that helped reduce the amount of heat island that Lincoln Woods represents, that piece of shade went away. So Lincoln Woods now is a little bit hotter and a little bit balder looking than it was when I moved in here, and certainly more so than what this plan represents. It would be nice if we could get more canopy trees in. But if you want to come up and take a look at this as you wander through, as you wander through the site, look at the buildings and how they go in and out and what opportunities there exist for community, and then also just look at how the plantings work or don't work. And those are my observations about Lincoln Woods.
So folks, we have time for some questions.
Yeah.
So fire away, and when it's time to stop, you'll be dividing in two. Now, with the last group, we tested human behavior. And we thought, well, half would naturally go with one and half with the other, but it didn't happen. It was 2/3, 1/3. What does that mean? We can all ponder, but there'll be 2 timekeepers. Raise your hand. Try to split evenly, which happens to be 15 in each group. There are about 30 of you. But spend a few minutes asking all the questions that you might have about this site. I know that Deb wasn't introduced. She's a landscape architect, has done some nice work here in Lincoln at Codman Farm, designed a courtyard in front of the barn. So please fire away, and then we'll call time out and divide.
I'd like to know who's the landscape designer that plantings after some of the white pines were taken down?
When this place was renovated 8 years ago.
I know, me too.
Yeah, and so Kathy Schreiber did the landscape design to populate some of the areas with smaller trees and shrubs. And then she also did, she located the new back decks where new back decks went in. Yeah. Alice.
Is there any kind of control over the way tenants can plant and do decoration of their individual units?
You are allowed to plant, and you'll see this at my place because I took every scrap of plantable area that I could. There's a new regulation that I have so far flouted, but I'm not going to be able to do that after today. I have a piece of driftwood and a planter and a morning glory vine going up next to my front door. And all of the front entries now are to be kept clear, nothing on the ground. So I'm gonna have to take my nice driftwood that's covered with moss and little fungi and my planter down.
Why would they do that?
They want a uniform look. So this is a consequence actually. TCB owns this. Yeah. TCB owns this now. It's a privately owned complex, and they prefer to see a uniform appearance to the units.
So you don't know whether you're going into your right own home or maybe somebody else's?
You'll see. You'll know mine. It'll be evident to you. I know where I'm headed. I actually painted my door yellow, which is a little.
I painted my door blue.
Yeah.
And I left some, they returned
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So there's.
All the doors should be a different color.
So. Yeah. So there's with the change of ownership from town ownership to private ownership, there's been a little bit less. Let's do this the way it's done in Lincoln. Let's make things a little less individual and personal, and let's make it look more regimented and ordinary.
Based on my understanding, there's no vegetables.
Oh yeah, right, no vegetables.
What about herbs? We have
Yeah, herbs are fine. Herbs are fine. So, any other questions?
Are any slow-growing shade trees being planted?
Not a lot. In front of my place, there's a lawn, and they planted a red maple there, which is a fast-growing canopy tree. It's growing really fast. But for the most part, well, actually behind you, you can see there's a pin oak. See the two mounds of mulch, the base of those two canopy trees? It's a pin oak and I think a red maple, if I'm right. And those were put in. Those would have been put in 8 years ago, also. So they're growing pretty well. they're a little over mulched, but they're growing fine. Yeah.
As a landscape architect, do you know how or if future developments could be regulated to preserve existing vegetation or native vegetation?
That I think probably the question was do I know if future developments can be controlled in regards to what existing vegetation can or must remain? I don't know. I'm gonna guess that for the mall, for instance, the giant trees along Lincoln Road, I'm guessing they're not going to do so well with the new development because their roots are really gonna be further affected. And their crowns, they're already in decline. I don't know. I think that may be a question of citizens speaking up at the town and trying to through FOMA or other organizations or individually trying to ask for that as a, if this development is going to go in, can we make it so that we save as many existing trees as possible and protect them and then foster it so that they can be sustained beyond the construction period. That'd be my bet. Other questions?
Thank you, Deb.
Thank you.
Now come to my house.